All right, let's get into it. Today, we are getting our hands dirty with the absolute foundation of all modern IT. And I mean all of it, the hypervisor. You know, if you've ever wanted to build your own virtual lab or test out some new software or even just kind of grasp how the cloud really works, well, it all starts right here. So let's just start with the basic problem, right? You've got one really powerful server, but you need to run, say, a web server, a database, and maybe a development environment, and they all have to be completely separate from each other. How do you possibly pull that off without buying 3 different machines? Well, the answer, of course, is a hypervisor. A hypervisor is that, well, it's that kind of magic layer of software that makes all of this virtualization possible. The best way to think about it is like this. If your physical server is the plot of land, the hypervisor is the concrete foundation that lets you build multiple, completely independent rooms, those are your virtual machines, right on top of it. And each room can have its own OS, its own purpose, and it won't interfere with any of the others. So here's what we're going to cover. We'll quickly touch on what these hypervisors are, then we'll get into the common ground of prepping your hardware. After that, we're going to explore 2 totally different paths, installing VMware ESXi and then installing Microsoft's Hyper-V. And finally, we'll wrap up by looking at what you do after your hypervisor is up and running. Okay, first things first, before we even dream about installing software, we got to make sure our server is actually ready for the job. And this hardware prep is pretty much the same and, believe me, absolutely crucial no matter which hypervisor you end up choosing. Now look, these are the official minimums for VMware's ESXi 8.0, but honestly, they're a fantastic baseline for any serious hypervisor setup. You're going to need a 64-bit multi-core CPU for sure. And while it says 8 gigs of RAM is the minimum, you're going to want at least 12. And pay attention to that 32-gigabyte boot device. That space isn't even for your virtual machines. It's for the hypervisor's own little OS and something called a scratch partition where it keeps temporary files and logs. And this right here, if you only remember one thing from this whole section, please make it this one. Before you do anything else, you have got to boot into your server's BIOS or UEFI and enable hardware virtualization. It's usually called Intel VTX or maybe AMD RVI. If this feature isn't turned on, your hypervisor just plain will not work. It is a non-negotiable first step. Seriously. All right, hardware is prepped. Let's start our first journey, VMware ESXi. Now, this is what we call a Type 1 or a bare metal hypervisor. What that means is it installs directly onto your server's hardware. It doesn't need Windows or Linux underneath it. ESXi is the operating system. And this approach is pretty much the enterprise standard because it's known for its killer performance and being rock-solid stable. And yeah, this diagram really lays it all out. The entire workflow, the whole thing. It starts with just one action, installing ESXi on the host machine. Everything else you hear about, like vCenter for management and of course all your virtual machines, all of it gets built on top of this one single crucial foundation. So how does it actually build? Well, installing ESXi is actually surprisingly straightforward. You just need to grab the official ISO file from Broadcom, they're the ones who own VMware now, and use a tool to make a bootable USB drive. Then you just boot your server from that USB, follow a pretty simple text-based installer, and really the 2 most important things you'll do are set a strong root password and configure the basic network settings so you can manage the thing remotely. Okay, here's a little pro tip for you, straight from the official VMware docs, and trust me, this can save you a ton of headaches later. ESXi hosts, they generate a lot of log data. By setting up a remote syslog server, you're sending all those logs to one central place, which is not only amazing for troubleshooting, but it also frees up precious space on your ESXi boot device. Okay, time to switch gears completely. Let's explore a very different route, the Microsoft Hyper-V path. This journey starts from a totally different place because you don't really install Hyper-V on your server, you enable it within your server's operating system. And that really is the key difference. See, with ESXi, the hypervisor is the OS. But with Hyper-V, you first install an operating system like Windows Server, and then you go in and enable the Hyper-V role from inside of it. It's a completely different way to think about the setup, and it makes it a really natural choice for places that are already deep in the Windows ecosystem. For anyone who likes a good graphical interface, the whole process is built right into Windows Server. You just pop open the Server Manager, fire up the Add Roles and Features wizard, and just check the box for Hyper-V. The wizard then kind of holds your hand through adding the management tools and doing some initial setup, like creating your first virtual network switch. But of course, for all the power users and automation fans out there, why would you click through a wizard when you can do the whole thing with a single command? You just open up PowerShell and type this in. Install-Windows feature, name Hyper-V, include management tools, restart. That one line does everything the GUI wizard does, but in seconds. It installs the role, the tools, and even restarts the server for you. It's fast, it's efficient, and it's perfect for scripting your setups. So one of the first things you'll configure in Hyper-V is a virtual switch, and you really need to know these three types. An external switch is what you'll use most of the time. It lets your VMs talk to the outside world. An internal switch makes a private network that also includes your host server, which is great for management. And then a private switch is a totally isolated sandbox where your VMs can only talk to each other and nothing else. So you've done it. You've laid the foundation, whether you went down the ESXi path or the Hyper-V path, your server has rebooted, the hypervisor is running, and the hard part is over. So what's next? Well, now comes the fun part. It's time to build your very first room, your first virtual machine. Now, just take a look at this. I know it looks like two different lists, but the core ideas here are identical. With VMware, you create a new VM, you point it to an operating system installer, you give it some CPU and RAM. With Hyper-V, you do the exact same things, just with slightly different wizards and menus. The big takeaway here is this. Once you understand the idea of building a VM, you can do it on any platform. Okay, let's bring it all home. We've covered a lot of ground here, right? From prepping the bare metal all the way to laying down two very different virtual foundations. We've seen the direct bare metal approach of ESXi and the integrated Windows role approach of Hyper-V. And what's important is that both of these paths lead to the same destination, an incredibly powerful starting point for your own virtual world. And that really just leaves one question, doesn't it? Having seen both paths, which one makes more sense for you? Do you want the raw performance and the massive ecosystem of a dedicated ESXi host? Or does the seamless integration and, potential cost savings of using Hyper-V inside your existing Windows environment make more sense? The choice is yours. And just remember, installing the Hypervisor isn't the end of the project. It's just the beginning. It is the clean, solid foundation that you can use to build anything you can possibly imagine. Huge test labs, super resilient production services, or just a safe place to break stuff and experiment. The worlds you build from here, they're entirely up to you. Thanks for joining me.